Groups like ISIL cannot defeat us on the battlefield, so they try to terrorize us at home, against soft targets, against civilians, against innocent people. Even as we're vigilant, we cannot and we will not succumb to fear. Nor can we allow fear to divide us, for that's how terrorists win.
President Obama at that joint press conference earlier today calling for us to remain united, vigilant, and not to be afraid with the threat of ISIS. As we continue now on Newsmax Prime, the president's tone and his comments over the past couple of weeks have received a whole lot of criticism. Pundits and security analysts insist he's just not doing enough to actively fight the war on terror. Meantime, up on Capitol Hill, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are calling for a more robust strategy against ISIS. The president insists he has one, but when will we see it? For more on this, we're pleased to welcome in at the anchor desk Glenn Downs, the former chief of staff to Congressman Walter B. Jones of North Carolina, and joining us via Skype from Washington, D.C., David Goodfriend of Goodfriend Government Affairs. David's also the former Deputy Staff Secretary to President Bill Clinton. Our thanks to you both. Glenn, let me begin with you. Have a situation where today French President Hollande is in the United States. He's going to Moscow tomorrow. Earlier this week, he was in the UK. He says what happened in Paris was an act of war, and yet our president today said, well, we're stepping up our coordination of intelligence. Is the American response beyond feeble?
Well, J.D., I think part of the problem is the foreign policy establishment in Washington is trying to do two different things at once. It has been, at least up till now, trying to take out President Assad in Syria, at the same time trying to have this ISIS strategy, whatever it may be. And those two things might be inconsistent. And I think once Mr. Putin and now others have gone into Syria, that sort of exposed the inconsistency of those two strategies.
David, we understand, regardless of party label, it is a difficult job being president of the United States. But you know, your old boss, President Clinton, we didn't always see eye to eye, but he had somewhat of a more energetic foreign policy. Looking at it, partisan rhetoric aside, what do you think President Obama is doing right, and what is he doing wrong?
Well, let me start with what I think he's done wrong. I think it was a terrible error of judgment and execution to say we draw a red line at the use of chemical weapons. The chemical weapons were used by Assad, and the consequences did not follow, which sort of signaled, I think, projected a kind of weakness that we, as the United States, should not project. But I do think that his hands have been badly tied by the fact that China and Russia support Assad. So if we were going to declare war on Russia and China, I guess that would be the upshot. It's clearly not a good idea. And ISIS, of course, grew out of an anti-Assad effort. ISIS is determined to overthrow Assad or take territory away from Assad. And that brings us to Iran. Iran actually is on the same side as the United States when it comes to ISIS, and obviously not on the same side of the United States when it comes to Hamas and other groups. So what a mess. And I think what's tragic about this is we're in the middle of election silly season, and somebody likes to sound presidential by saying, I'd go in there and bomb them, whoever them might be. We kind of saw where that led us the last time American forces were committed on the ground in Iraq and then withdrawn. I think it's very dangerous to say this is simple. Here's a simple answer to a really complex problem. There is no simple answer, and I think the American people really want honesty right now. They want directness and honesty and no BS.
And in that vein, here is a story that I think will shock people, and it's straight, and we think it's been verified. CNSnews.com reporting that U.S. planes on a mission to take out ISIS fuel tankers could not go after them because our planes ran out of ammunition. Only a minute remains. Glenn, if you don't have the ammo to get the job done, what are the planes doing there in the first place?
Well, it's almost worse than that, J.D. There are credible reports on the internet where you can actually see the graphics that U.S. planes dropped leaflets in advance of bombing these fuel trucks, those that they did bomb, 45 minutes in advance, telling the drivers to flee, that they were getting ready to be bombed. So there's something terribly inconsistent between the words that are being said there in Washington and the actions on the ground in the Middle East.
David, you'll get the last word. Even as you decry what you, I guess, would say is muscular rhetoric, you got to admit this is a bad situation in terms of not executing an air war. 15 seconds.
I'm sure our Air Force is perfectly capable of taking out targets. The problem is that's not going to be enough. You can't just say high-powered ordnance is the answer to all the problems in the Middle East. It hasn't been in the past, won't be this time. We need to be smarter than our...
And one smart thing, if you're going to have the planes up, David, you have got to have the ammo with the planes. David, thanks. Glenn, thanks to you. We're coming back with more.